I had a really heartwarming experience today, but before I had that heartwarming experience, I was attacked by a duck. This little duck that would have been like less than half a foot high was coming at me full ball with its beak open, squeaking at me for some reason, so I hightailed out of that. But I went around this duck, this murderous duck. I went around him because I was going to pick up my medals and my service medals, the ones that you get for when you go to war or go overseas and all these different things. When I went to the shop, this old man was picking up his medals or doing something. I wasn't really paying attention because I don't. I normally drift off into my own realm or my own universe when I'm waiting around. The guy hands me my medals over and says, "Yeah, thank you," and all those different things. So I paid him. This man, he would have been pushing 70 plus. He was quite aged. And he said to me, "When did you go to Iraq?" And I was kind of taken back. And I was like, "Sorry?" He goes, "Oh, I'm looking at your medals. When did you go to Iraq?" And it kind of dawned to me. It was a really weird realization that, and I said, "Oh, I've never been to Iraq. It's just that I've been somewhere else that's normally assigned to Iraq." So kind of a support surface. And in that particular deployment, I was the postal clerk, the most loved and equally the most hated person on the base. Because heaven forbid if your letter doesn't get there the day, it's not Australia Post's fault, it's not the Emirates Post's fault, it's the post clerk's fault. Anyway, he asked me when I went to Iraq. And so I haven't been to Iraq, and I told him a little bit about the postie, and his eyes lit up. He was like literally the old man embodiment of a Christmas tree. I've never seen someone so energized and so interested in my stories before. And sorry, I'm just still getting over this cold. But anyway, so he was lighting up. He was very excited, all the different things. And he told me that he'd been on Operation Catalyst, which is this Iraq medal. And he actually had been to Iraq and all these different things. And it wasn't a transactional conversation. It wasn't a conversation where it was like a case of one-upmanship. It was kind of like two people of different generations conversing about things of yesteryear. And this particular deployment I went on, I just realized it's 20 years not today, but 20 years this year. And it feels like a lifetime ago. And I I had this realization when I left the shop after I was chatting to this gentleman quite a few times about the different things we both got up to, and all the things that he got up to in Iraq and where I got up to where I was, is that 20 years has gone by so quickly. It's just insane. I can't get my head around it. Like, I am quite, I kind of had a realization about my age. So I've just turned 44. I'm 44 this year. And I've kind of come to the realization that my life's flying me by. And I know it sounds very cliche and, what would you say to your 20-year-old self and all these different things. And that's what it felt like having a conversation to this gentleman, which I later found out he was a retired group captain, which in itself, being another Air Force person, is just phenomenal, and to reminisce about stories and all those different things. But I will touch base on a little bit about that. But it's something that I've always hard to get my head around, because I know a lot of people say, "Hey, look, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self? Or what advice would you do in your 30s? And you see a lot of YouTube channels talking about, "Hey, if you're 30 years old, this is what I wish I had been told," and all these different things, which between you and I think is a kind of bit of BS, because my brain won't let me calculate that you can go back in time. I know it's physically impossible. I'm not so sure if that's the right way of saying it. So I can't really calculate, what I would do or what would I tell my 20-year-old self. I have had advice from older gentlemen and older people over the years. A little segue, if I will. And hopefully you haven't bored of me yet, but I was getting my hair cut one day, and the barber would have been pushing 80. He was a barber that I went to a very, very long time. It was just, I kind of clicked with someone and I kind of want to keep talking to them. And so hopefully that's resonating between you and I. But he was telling me that, and what it stuck with me, he was telling me is that his personal opinion is that if you haven't made it by 65, you haven't made it, or you'll never make it. And I don't know about you, but that's been ingrained into me, into my soul for the last 10 years. And I'm kind of having this reverse ticking clock, or a ticking clock counting down from, obviously that's what, just a little bit over 20 years, that if I haven't made it by then, and I won't, and I know it sounds silly, and I know it sounds a bit, chaotic and all these different things, but something like that's really stuck with me. And speaking to this gentleman today about his medals and all those different things, is that I will get to that point where someone comes to me or someone else sees my medals, and quite possibly the roles might reverse in 25 years, is where I go to pick up my medals as a 70-year-old and a 40-year-old walks in, or a 20-year-old walks in, and all these different things. And I think it was that human connection between him and I. Maybe he's like, maybe his grandkids or his wife doesn't care about his war stories or his worries. And that connection between him and I, talking about things and talking very low level stuff about our experiences in the Middle East, kind of reinvigorated both of us, to tell you the truth. It was really weird. I walked out of there, I won't say a different person, because it does sound a bit dickish, but I was more rejuvenated. I suppose that's the best way of putting it. I was like quite happy to have had that conversation. Generally, I normally say hello to people, smile, and then basically revert back to my baseline face and just walk out and carry on with my life. But knowing that someone was out there that was interested beyond belief, and I've never come across this before, it's just something that to me was very mundane, and something that was a blip in the history that would never repeat. It's quite hard to say, but I've always looked back on my service and my deployments to the Middle East, not with a pride, or not with excitement or anything along the lines of. It's just something that happened. Something that needed to happen at a certain point of time. That's not to say that I'm not proud of my service. It's not to say I'm not proud of all those different things. And that's not what I'm trying to say. But it's something that to me was so blasé, so mundane. Something that, let's face it, a lot of people don't experience. But for someone to, I suppose, listen to my mundane stories, or what I thought was mundane, and process it and hang on every word, it was insane. Like I said, I'm really still in the high. Like, I'm really excited. But I'm going to leave the episode there. And by all means, please, if you do get this far, I would love for you to answer this question for me. I'm going to flip it on its head. What would you tell your 80-year-old self? I'm quite curious in the comment sections. I know a lot of people say, hey, what would you tell your 20-year-old self? Like I was saying before, you can't go back in time, but you can always go forward in time, which is the sad realization for all of us, right? So let me know what you would tell your 80-year-old self. Catch you next night. Catch you tomorrow night. Good night.